Dark beasts, car chaos. Akanshai, Fakultat, Chaos Girth.
Yeah, so Khorne-bulls. Today we're going to be talking about them and also talking about Minotaurs with Greatweapons and kind of just about Minotaurs in general. As you guys saw in the opening there, there's actually Games Workshop themselves that released a screenshot showing some Khorne unit cards, and in that highlighted both, you know, in the unit selection and on the cards there was unmistakably Khorne-bulls. Now, this brings up a few questions. Number one, will those be added to the Beastmen with their upcoming DLC that has now been confirmed with Torox the Brass Bull? Will they be added in Game 3 or not at all? I can't really imagine Creative Assembly not adding the Khorne-bulls to Beastmen. Also, does that mean we'll be getting other god-specific Beastmen units? Definitely. Probably. I don't think you guys should take this as necessarily confirmation that that is the case, but it definitely piques that interest, right? Hints at that direction. And so for today, we've got Spudhouse against myself. Just so happen to have one of the better games I've seen recently with Minotaurs with Greatweapons. He's up against my Tomb Kings with the Beastmen. So going to be in for a potential tough time. Tomb Kings are undead, arguably the weakest undead, but still, Khazrak the One-Eye up front on foot with his damage resistance item, 52 melee defense. Pretty sturdy combatant, all things considered. Doesn't have regeneration, but immune to psychology as well from the Primal Fury, I think. Anyway, Beast of Shadows here. I've got a chariot on this side, some spears, 4 Centaurs with throwing axes, some harpies. Skirmishing out on the flank as well. For myself, Cetra the Imperishable up on his chariot. We've got 2 War Sphinxes, definitely one of the best Tomb Kings monsters in general, especially right now. A whole staunch line of Skelly Spears, some Skelly Chaff, Nekar Horsemen, Skeleton Horsemen Archers, as I said, and yeah, regular Horsemen as well. So talking a little bit more about Minotaurs in general, it's funny, in that screenshot, the Khorne-bulls, rather, if you notice, are actually, like, taking quite a bit of HP damage already, and that is definitely an issue with Minotaurs, right? Minotaurs are just squishy in general for how expensive they are, and very rarely will pay out. Minotaurs with Greatweapons do have anti-large, massive AP damage, and good charge bonus as well. We can see 44 charge. They're now kind of maneuvering over here. 2 War Sphinxes stopping up these chariots and just generally trying to mess with the Tomb King's line. I'm also countering with the Nekar Horsemen against the Harpies and the Centaurs there. Nice cast of Penumbral Pendulum down the front line, as Cetra also makes his presence felt, just running over Khazrak there. So the unit of Minos with Greatweapons are going to go straight after him. Minotaurs are definitely a glass cannon unit, there's no question about that. And I have a video I recorded, I don't think I've actually released it yet, about Ripperdactyls. I believe Rubduckvor actually ended up casting the first game, so if you want to preview that, you can go watch his cast. But yeah, and they're like Ripperdactyls. There's a few other units that are just so glass cannon. Like, their damage output on paper is amazing. But over here on this low ground, this Nekar Horseman gets caught up with the Minotaurs with Greatweapons in the woods. That's not great for me, but Cetra and the War Sphinx definitely making their presence felt in this infantry fight. Obviously wouldn't expect my skeletons to win, but the Minotaurs will be very good against my 2 big constructs primarily, and Cetra also going to have to be careful. You can see I'm just kind of avoiding them for the most part, using him to go after the infantry, just kind of terror bombing here. And this right here, definitely a mistake in hindsight for me. I do have some spears coming in for support, because Minotaurs kind of just die to low-tier spears and skirmishers. That low armor, low melee defense for the cost means they are absolute glass cannons, and here fighting in the woods against the War Sphinx with the spears incoming, I figured I would be okay. But Minotaurs don't suffer penalty from woods. They have woodsmen, as they are beastmen, of course, which does give them a pretty good advantage fighting in that specific situation, so they'll do okay there. Meanwhile, here on the other side, this other unit of Minotaurs with Greatweapons kind of gets pulled away a little bit there. I'm just sort of counter-skirmishing with the Centaurs with Greatweapons. And one thing, just to kind of note, I know Spudhouse is a patron of mine, big thanks to him for his patronage, and this is actually from a practice session. Just a quick kind of note about these Skirmish Cavalry here. Skirmish Cavalry Micro isn't so much about targeting attack orders, it's more about positioning, right? So, like, he's going to pull up here, or I think he just did, try and throw some more axes at like the War Sphinx or etc. And it is good to try and focus fire, but you don't want them blobbed up too much like this. It's better to just think about the positioning like, okay, like if I were playing Beastmen right now, I would drag these guys in just a movement order out here, kind of on the other side, where they're all in a line, but their range, if you can kind of estimate, will still be in range only of the War Sphinx. And then, you know, maybe you have to click a focus attack order after they're in position, but Skirmish Cavalry Micro is more so about positioning than everything. Like, you see these guys right here. This is a great example. I'm shooting these Minotaurs, and I'm also within range of these Razorgore chariots as well, so when they rally, I can maybe just pop a volley quickly back there and see them off once more, and you see I don't even need to end up doing that, but these Minotaurs, back to them. Another situation where they're going to suffer low-tier skirmishers and low-tier anti-large infantry. I mean, they were already a problem before, but they're even more of a problem now with the mass changes. Like, just spearmen, low-tier spears in general are just the bane of Minotaurs, which is pretty sad. And I mean, it, you know, from a kind of game mechanics and balance standpoint, it does make sense to a degree. You can see this War Sphinx here with Incantation Protection, dueling Khazrak. Actually not doing too much damage to him right now, but yeah, the Minotaurs charging with Cetra. I'm going to pop the Curse, actually, which will give a nice kind of AoE. It's a single target scaling, so it will be good against this low model count unit. But yeah, anyway, I kind of totally got derailed on my train of thought there. Minotaur is just very squishy for the cost. Massive weapon strength, you know, great anti-large bonus on the Greatweapons. 28 anti-large is huge, right? 44 charge bonus. Like, they can beat a lot of high-tier units in the game in melee. The issue is with supporting units, like, they will take more incidental damage from supporting units than your opponents in most cases, right? Just because typically you have lower armor or melee defense on these Minotaurs than many of your opponent's high-value units. So that incidental damage ends up mattering quite a bit. Here, like, you can see these Minotaurs come in, the one that cleaned up the engagement in the forest there. My spear's still fighting down there against some Gore Herd, but Minotaurs pulled out. They come in, do a ton of damage to Cetra. Cetra below 1,000 HP, so I'm definitely in a critical danger zone here. But the Skeleton Horse Archer is just going to kind of surround here, get on these Minotaurs, start to drag them down. Skeleton Spearmen are going to move in as well, and this is just the issue. The Minotaurs, you know, without support, they really take way too much damage from low-tier stuff. And the offensive output is there for them to pay for themselves, and in this battle, spoiler alert, they did both pay for themselves. But Khazrak getting finished off here, you know, if Khazrak is Mortar, I might actually potentially lose this battle, just given, you know, the spawn summons and the regeneration. Khazrak's okay. He's okay on his chariot as well, but speaking of chariots, Cetra going to pop a little bit of Incantation of Protection, going to path over to these Gore Herds right here and just allow the spears continue to screen. I believe I'm completely out of... I just have some Skeleton Horsemen over here who could come help finish the job. But because Cetra is so low, the balance power is still pretty close, but you can see it tilts pretty decisively there as a few key units rout. The Khemrian War Sphinx, the fact that it applies the attack by missile debuff is one of the things that makes it so strong. Any monster that has a Howdah is actually, it's basically like a... You can think of it almost as like an AoE leadership debuff, right? Because if at least if you don't have any other ranged units, which you might not. Like in this build, pretty light on range, right? Only the two Skirmish Cav here, which both did a great job, by the way. But yeah, the War Sphinx, that attack by missile debuff, very good against lower leadership factions where you can rout them. With my War Sphinxes, though, you can see the one was limited very heavily and just even hard countered by this Minotaur, who almost got 3,000 value. So really nice offensive potential there. The other one did end up paying for itself just, but also kind of got dragged around by some low-tier stuff. You sort of saw their weaknesses on display there in some situations. At the end of the day, it's just not quite enough. Like I said, maybe if you have more Mortar in here, rather than Khazrak, it turns out differently, but at the same time, cost difference, you may have to change some things. Anyway, yeah, Minotaurs definitely performed pretty well here, though, and this is a build where, you know, no ranged units, some low-tier spears, but enough so that they can avoid some high-value units for them to try and attack. It's a favorable situation for them in general, right? Yeah, Gore Herds trade pretty well into Skeletons, don't quite pay for themselves. But the Centaurs are throwing axes. A little bit of a mixed bag. I think that's, honestly, Spudhouse probably could have won this if he had microed, and him and I kind of agreed that if he had microed his Centaurs throwing axes a little bit better, arguably could have potentially won this. It's hard to say, you know, those could have, would have situations. Situations are situational, right? And why you play the battles. It's hard to really say for one way or the other. RNG could have turned out differently as well, and I mean, there's some things there. Anyway, but yeah, the skirmish cap micro is one thing. Like I said, position is more important than focus fire orders, I would say. Just make sure that you're kind of getting that good positioning with them. Anyway, back to Minotaurs. So the Khorne-bulls, I guess, how they relate to all of this is that Khorne-bulls, I mean, from what we've seen of the Khorne unit so far, like from what I saw in my early access time with Khorne versus Kislev, was very limited, granted, and the HP scaling especially was way off. But in general, what I noticed comparing like the Chaos Warriors of Khorne to the regular Chaos Warriors is they picked up Frenzy, and baseline also had higher attack and lower defense. Now, that's not good for Minotaurs because they're already very poor on defensive stats. Now, picking up Frenzy and extra offensive stats is going to be great, but $13.50 to pay for a unit that's this squishy. I mean, you've got $12.50 for the base. The shielded ones are my personal favorite, mostly because they pick up an extra 10 armor, which is not a ton, but it's something. And more importantly, they have a 55% missile block chance, which is very good. And I think they're the only monstrous infantry in the game right now that actually have a missile block chance, which is pretty unique. Makes them fairly fun. You don't get any bonuses and a lower charge bonus as well, in terms of anti-infantry, anti-large, but more survivability. But just in general, I think Minotaurs need something more. They need, in order for them to actually be good again, they have been very good at times in the past where they were a little bit overtuned, but in order for them to be good again, they need one of a number of things, and I don't think that they should do all of these together. I think you do only maybe one of these three. Either a cost reduction, maybe in the area of like 100 points to 150 points even. I mean, like 1,100 for base Minotaurs and shielded ones, 1,200 for the Greatweapons. Just makes it a little bit easier for them to pay for themselves, and it's less punishing if they don't, which they often won't because they're so squishy, right? Alternately, you could give them more HP. That's kind of a easy fix, or more armor, honestly. Given the armor that they are wearing, I mean, I get that they're supposed to be light beastmen, but there's an argument you could be made that you could maybe bump these guys up like 50 armor base, give the shielded ones like 65 maybe. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How would you buff Minotaurs? I definitely think they need something. I mean, in that battle, they definitely did great, but that should definitely be stressed that that battle is the rare occasion rather than the norm. More often than not, Minotaurs with Greatweapons will not pay out, just because any low-tier skirmish unit on the field will just laugh and shoot them to death, basically. So, let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.